Great War, a conflict that shaped the destiny of nations, but amid the bloodshed and chaos, there existed stories of remarkable courage and indomitable spirit. Today, we take you back in time to the rugged terrain of Gallipoli, 1915, where a young soldier's life would change forever. Enlisting at just 17, he ventured into the heart of the war, ready to face the unknown. Little did he know, the journey that awaited him would be nothing short of astonishing. From fierce battles to grim discoveries and an unexplainable twist of fate, his story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. The following is his account.
I enlisted in the Lancashire Fusiliers in November 1914, when I was only 17 years old, and in June 1915 I went to Gallipoli, where we landed in the night time. A big ship had been run aground there. The River Clyde and pontoon bridges had been made at the side of her, connecting with the shore. We left our transport and got into little steam trawlers, which were out at the Dardanelles as minesweepers and so on, and these took us to the pontoon bridges. We hurried over them, under fire, and having got ashore we went straight into a bivouac rest camp. We spent 5 days in the camp, then we went into the support line of trenches, which is the second line, and after a week or two we went on fatigue. We were in a Turkish communication trench, digging it wider, and we came across all sorts of queer things. We dug a dead Turk up, a chap without a head, and near him we dug up one of our short Lee Enfield rifle. He had equipment on, and when we looked into his pouches we found that he had some of our ammunition besides his own. We supposed, from the look of things, that he had been knocked over by a shell and buried in the rubbish. We were throwing the earth out and making the trench deeper when we came across the Turk's head. One chap got it on a shovel and fired it over the top of the parapet. You got used to digging bodies up. It was nothing to strike one with your pick or shovel. All this experience was good for us and got us used to fighting before we were actually in it, because there was firing going on all the time and preparations were being made for charging the Turks with the bayonet. Things began to get very warm early in August. At about 5 o'clock on the afternoon of the 6th, which was a Friday, there was a heavy bombardment and a big advance on the left of the peninsula that was Sabala Bay. According to the arrangements, we were to charge on the Saturday morning, 2 hours after the bombardment began. The bombardment was to have started at 5 o'clock, but somehow the Turks got to know about it, and our attack was postponed till 10 o'clock. At that hour, we were ready for our job. I shall never forget that Saturday morning at H.E. Baba. I had my sight then, and could watch all that was going on. We were on the ledge of our trench, waiting to spring over and rush at the Turks. Our officer was standing by us, looking at the watch on his wrist, and a terrible strain it must have been. 2 minutes to go, he said, and we waited. 1 minute to go, said the officer next time he spoke. Then, at 10 o'clock, over, he shouted. That's all I remember of what he said. He may have said more, but I can't tell. Over, was the order, and over we went. We order, and over we went. We all cheered, and then we went helter-skelter for the Turks with the bayonet. They were said to be 250 yards away, but it was a lot more than that. At any rate it seemed so. And the ground we had to rush over was terrible rough, and with a lot of vines about that twined round your feet and tripped you up. Some of our chaps were knocked flat in this way, some fell of exhaustion, and lots were killed or wounded. The best part of our lot were knocked out before we ever got near the Turks. But when we reached the trench that we were going for, we found that there were not many of the Turks left. Our gunners had settled them, so that the trench was full of dead Turks, some of them with their heads blown completely off. Our task was simple enough. We had to go for one particular trench that was straight in front of us. I can't give any special particulars about what happened, because it was all a sort of blur, but I remember a few things clearly, and it's these that I'm telling of. The trench was up a hillside, and when I got to it, I saw that part of it had been blown up. I rushed at the opening and fell into the trench. I was alone. I don't know whether I was the first man in the trench or not, but I do know that there were none of our chaps there, only myself and dead bodies. I scrambled to my feet, and the first thing I noticed near me was a Turkish officer, wounded and unarmed. There we were, the two of us, the Turk looking at me and me looking at him. I had my bayonet, and I could have settled him or taken him prisoner, but British soldiers don't touch unarmed men, and I was too busy to take him, and a man who is by himself doesn't as a rule make prisoners. I was looking to see which way to go to get to our other chaps, and the Turkish officer, noticing this, motioned down the trench to the left, to show me where they had gone. I began to clear off to them, but in my eagerness and excitement, I did not notice a wire which ran across the top of the parapet. Before I knew what was happening, my rifle got fast in the wire at the bayonet standard, that is, where the bayonet fixes onto the muzzle. Then an extraordinary thing took place. My rifle was tilted over, and the bayonet stuck in the back of a Turk who was huddled up in the bottom of the trench. The first I saw of him was when my bayonet struck him. I looked to see if he was dead, but he never moved. I don't know whether I killed him or not, but if he wasn't dead, he was a good actor. I'd been about 2 minutes, it may have been longer, in getting my rifle clear of the wire, and all that time, for it seemed long, I was alone. When I pulled myself together and went on again, in the trench, I came face to face with a Turk who was coming from the opposite direction. He seemed to be mad and made a lunge at me with his bayonet, but it was broken and no good to him. He saw that and turned to run away. As he did so, I bayoneted him in the back, and he fell. I could have shot him, but my magazine was empty, for I had been firing a lot. I passed the Turk, and then I found our chaps. It seemed a good distance from where I got into the trench to where I found them. I know I had to go round 1 or 2 bends. When we got together again, and it was a joy to be back with my chums, we were ordered to line the trench. I don't know who gave the order, but it wasn't an officer. I was the end man of the line, and we were firing hard when a bullet came, and all I knew was that I could not see, and that I was lying on the floor of the trench, with one of our chaps bandaging me. I don't know who it was. I was left there while they went on firing. I don't know how long I was lying there, but I was terribly thirsty and drank 2 bottles of water my own, and one I took from a dead man near me. I could not see him, but I felt by groping about his equipment that he was a British chap. There were not enough of our men to hold the trench, and they were forced to retire and leave me. The Turks came up in the trench, and I heard them shouting something like Gara, Gara, though it may have been Allah. Allah! They were fearfully excited, and I thought it was all up with me then. I never gave myself any hope. The Turks were running about the trench, looking for our chaps. They ran over me, no doubt thinking I was dead. I was lying on my side with my hands covering my head, holding the bandages to stop the blood from coming out. I had to do that because it was only a field dressing. I knew then that I had lost my eyes. I felt as if all the bones in my body were broken with the Turks running over me and stepping on me. After some time had passed, the Turks settled down a bit, not being so excited, and then they began to search the trench and examine the bodies and men in it. Seeing that I was not dead, they propped me up and began searching my pockets. They were talking away, but, of course, I could not understand them. They were not rough just then, but they were afterwards when I was being led out. They took my paybook and photographs and everything I had. I stood up, and then the Turks took me to a communication trench about 10 yards away. As I was passing them in the firing line, they hit out at me with their hands, trying boxing competitions on me. They dared not have done this if a Turkish officer had been about. 2 more Fusiliers were being led away along with me. They had both been bayoneted, they told me, after they were captured. I was taken to a place where there were Turkish doctors. One of them gave me a cup of tea. He could speak English, and he asked me how I was. I told him I was pretty bad. I was given a piece of dry bread, but I could not eat it because my teeth were closed. It was here that I met a New Zealander, or an Australian, a gunner who had been in the charge. He had no right to be in it, but you could not keep the Anzacs out of the scraps. He said that he and a pal were passing through the place when they saw what was going on. Each of them got hold of a rifle and bayonet and rushed into the charge. The Pole was killed and the other man was taken prisoner. From the doctor's place I was taken to a sort of dugout which had some kind of grass in it that felt like heather. The 2 bayoneted chaps had been taken there as well, and I was very glad to have their company. I was left in the dugout all night, with the other 2 Fusiliers alongside of me. In the morning we were put into oxen carts, 4 wounded men in each. They were rough things without springs, and were slowly dragged over rough tracks, you could not call them roads, so that it was fair torture to us, bumping all the while. At last we were stopped at a place and changed into another oxen cart and taken farther on. We stopped again, and were given a drink out of a bucket. They must have thought we were horses. I suppose they must have been giving a mule a drink, and then it struck them that they might give us a turn. But, bucket or no bucket, it was a fine drink. After that, I went into a field hospital, and for the first time since I had been wounded, I had my eyes properly attended to. A Turkish doctor who could speak a little English said eyes, then a word that sounded like yok. I suppose he meant that my eyes were gone, but I knew that before he did. After I had been attended to, I was put into a field hospital and fed 3 times a day. First of all, we had a ration of bread, which had to last all day, and a drink of tea. About the middle of the day we were given some soup, which the chaps called bill posters paste. It was awful stuff, and the chaps who were badly wounded in the body could not do with it, so they used to tipple their lot into my basin and I would get through it, as well as through my own. I could not eat bread or anything else, because my jaws were affected and my face was badly swollen. It is partly swollen still, but I could just manage to suck the bill posters paste through my teeth. It was not until now that I really understood what had happened to me. A bullet had struck me on the left side of the forehead and gone clean through both eyes, just missing the brain, and out at the right side, a wonderful escape from instant death, as our own doctors told me afterward. We were given cigarettes in the field hospital, a packet of 20 on every one of the 5 days we were there, and those cigarettes were a real treat. At the end of the 5 days we had another dose of oxen carts and were jolted inland to the seashore, where we were put into a steamer. They told us in the field hospital that we were bound for Constantinople, and I was rather glad I was going there. I did not want to stop any longer under the everlasting shell fire. When we went on board, we got a loaf of bread and a drink of tea and a drink of water, and that was all we had for the 3 days we were in the ship. She was full, the place where I was put being crowded with Englishmen, though there was a Turk on a seat above me. I was lying on the floor under it. It was a great relief to get to the end of the voyage and go ashore. I was taken off the boat, and as we went down the gangway, chaps were handing out nice new pieces of bread, hot, and cups of tea. I was lucky, because I had my cup filled twice. I was taken into a big hall. It seemed to be a sort of drill hall, and was given another drink of tea and piece of bread. Then we were taken in open carriages, drawn by 2 horses, to different hospitals. I well remember that my carriage had rubber tires, and that was very nice indeed after travelling in the oxen carts. I was carried on a stretcher into a hospital near the quayside, and here I was turned into a sort of Turk, where I was served with a pair of Turkish trousers big enough to fit 6 of us. They tied round the waist and ankle. I had a shirt also given to me, a sort of big gown which was tied round the waist. We looked like Julius Caesar in them. The Turks dressed my eyes and put me into a bed, and I was glad to get in because I had been thrown about for 10 days since I was wounded. I was in this hospital for about 3 weeks, treated by Turkish ladies who were acting as nurses. A lady who was there was said to be an Egyptian princess, the late Khedive of Egypt's sister, and she could speak English. She asked me my age, parents' names, occupation, and address at home, and said that next day she would write to my mother to tell her how I was getting on. But when next day came, I told her that a chap in my regiment had written home for me. She then told me a bit of joyful news, and that was that I was going to be sent home. There was a German Bible reader in the hospital. We called him Charlie, and I will say for him that he was like a brother to us. There are good and bad in every race, and this was one of the good Germans. He brought 2 Bibles in for chaps to read who could see. At the end of the 3 weeks, an order came for all prisoners to go into barracks, and I was taken off in a carriage. This time, I suppose I looked a real Turk, for I had a fez, though I had my baggy trousers hidden by my khaki trousers, which I had put over them, the Turkish doctor having told me to do this to keep me warm. I scored there because I don't think that the Turks meant me to walk off with the baggy breeches. But I kept them on all right, and I have them at home now as a memento. In these barracks we slept on a long platform, on a sort of thick matting which was very verminous. At first we were fed pretty well, and then not so well, because the Turkish food is not fit for Englishmen, and they have only 2 meals a day. They gave us rice and meat, but only a very little piece of meat. The rice was cooked in olive oil, and it seemed good when we were hungry, though we did not care for it. We used to get a ration of bread every afternoon about 4 o'clock. When that time came, our chaps, who were in good spirits, singing and whistling, used to kick up a row and shout, "Hitch, hitch, hitch," which was supposed to be Turkish and meant hurry up with the bread. It was the Sultan's birthday while we were in barracks, but they did not give us anything extra on that account. The Turkish Christmas was celebrated in August too, but we never heard anything about it. The American ambassador came and visited us and gave us 40 piastres each, equal to 6 and 8 pence. The ambassador used to come round to see that we were well treated, and we were always glad to see him. Through his efforts, I got released, and was then sent into the American hospital in Constantinople. I was there about a week, after which I was put in charge of 2 American sailors and sent to Didagac in Bulgaria, the place that has been bombarded lately. We stayed in a place called the Hotel London, supposed to be the best hotel in the town, but the sailors said it was nothing but an old shack. We were paying for our food and so on, as the ambassador had supplied us with money for our fares and keep, and the 2 sailors looked after me all the time. After 2 or 3 days' rest, a train journey of a day took us to another town called Drama, which is in Greece. From there, we went to Salonika, where one was handed over first to the American consul and then to the British consul, who passed me on to the military authorities. The British commander-in-chief asked me some questions about officers who were prisoners of war and so on, and I told him what I could. For a fortnight after that, I was in a hospital ship in the bay, the Gallipoli Castle, happy and well looked after. Then we went to Lemnos and on to Alexandria, where I had another spell in hospital 4 days. Then it was really a case of homeward bound, for I was put on board the Gurkha on November 7, and we sailed for Southampton. On board the Gurkha we had concerts and a good time until the 19th, when we reached Southampton. I went to St. Mark's Military Hospital, Chelsea, then came to this wonderful place, St. Dunstan's Hostel, which Mr. C. E. Arthur Pearson founded, and where I am very happy and learning poultry farming.